like, nope, I take my boat out on the water and I eat bagels for breakfast.
Yeah, not bad. Thank God.
Sean, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Chris, are you recording already?
Yeah, we're going.
Uh, oh, oh. Let's get started then. Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to the Flip Side podcast. Today we are talking about caution leading to injury. So generally you'd assume that caution is a good thing and that you should be cautious when doing tricks or doing any sport in general. But what I'm finding is that the more cautious you are, generally the more injury you get. Um, the reason that I'm bringing this up, the reason it's relevant to me now is because I just started tricking again. What is so fucking funny, Sean?
People are trying to enter the room behind me, which
Wait, what? Oh, I thought you meant into our Zoom room. I
no,
was like, someone's trying to get into our chat. That would have been crazy. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, the reason that this is relevant to me now is because I just started tricking again. I kind of took like a 4 month break because I tore my hip abductor and I was trying to get back into tricking, but it was just too early and I decided to just pull back. Getting back into jiu-jitsu was my first
which makes sense.
priority because that's kind of leading up. It's literally ridiculous how hard tricking is compared to everything else. Like
Yeah.
the more that I am expanding my reach in sports, the more I'm realizing how much it requires. It is
Oh yeah.
ridiculous how different it is. So working your way up is very important. So my first priority was getting back into jiu-jitsu. Once I could do that, and it was starting to do light acrobatics, and now I can do that. Well, anyway, so I'm at Defy, the trampoline park, and I'm doing tricks. And my biggest worry is planting my left leg aggressively and pushing off. So essentially
Yeah.
doing a G switch where I have to control that landing and jump off of it again. On trampoline, it was completely fine. But then the other thing is GMSs. So I'll do a GMS. So I'll raise my left knee, which is the injured knee, and then I will swipe my right leg, and then my left leg will come down. The reason that that's dangerous is because it comes down sideways, which is the direction of my hip abductor.
Yep.
And then also because I have to raise my knee up, which also activates my hip abductor. So doing that, if I'm cautious, what ends up happening is I don't put my foot down. So I'll do a GMS and I'll land in a hyper and then my left leg won't come down. But the problem is that actually activates my hip flexor more because it's keeping my leg up. And
Yep.
that's more shock than just letting it down.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's me being cautious. And the more cautious I am, the more I'm just kind of doing the wrong thing with my hips, holding my leg in the incorrect positions instead of letting the move flow through itself. I'm retaining so much excess energy in an attempt to protect my leg. And in retrospect, it's actually causing it more stress. It
Yeah.
worked out fine, but I was thinking that's probably why it was so difficult to get back into it. That's probably why I needed such a long break because the caution is required. I can't just start jumping into stuff. But at the same time, you have to get away from those bad habits because it's going to take more stress than it needs. So getting rid of that as soon as possible is the best for it, is what I'm finding.
No, that's true. And I always tend to err on the side of caution, working your way back into things. And I stress that with my kids a lot, where it's just like, no, you don't want to rush into things because if you're just coming back from an injury, like you're way too likely to re-injure it very quickly if you push too quick, too like hard, or too hard, too quick. And it's hard not to want to because like when you've taken a long break, you're just like, all right, I'm gonna go gung ho and I'm just gonna throw like the hard skills that I was doing before I got hurt. And it's like,
And you feel so good. You took such a long break too.
I know. And then you do it the first time and you're like, oh, everything feels fine. And then probably like 5 reps later of doing the same thing, everything feels fine. You're like, ooh, that doesn't feel good. And you're like, yeah, that's why I told you not to rush into it. But like,
Right.
okay, so hopefully we don't need to take more time off. And then they get hurt and you're like, okay. Like
That's what happened to me because right away it was maybe like 2 weeks out. I was like, wow, I feel great. And I started doing regular tricks again. And then I did 2 strong sessions. And after that, it just plummeted. And I was like,
oh
oh,
yeah.
well, there it goes. But I did 2 sessions and they were almost stronger because I had taken like a 2 week break. So I was like, oh, wow, I feel even better. But that's the rest of
Yeah.
my body talking, not that one.
That's everything else.
Yeah, everything else was like, holy shit, we're so strong. That one spot was like, okay, I'll try to keep up.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't do it.
Hey, if you enjoy our content and you want to show some support, make sure you follow us on Spotify and Instagram. Our Instagram tag is the_flip_side_podcast. Just make sure to go on there. Just shout out like old episodes that you liked, anything about the new episodes. You can comment on any of them. We would really appreciate it. And if you do end up wanting to go a step further, just become a supporter. All you have to do is follow the link in the description in any of our episodes that we've published. And you can also go under the About section in our Spotify homepage.
You can do as little as 99 cents a month. Any amount that you guys support us is going to help us build a better podcast and help build better trickers around the world.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't do
Well,
it.
there's also erring on the side of being too cautious when even like throwing tricks. So
Yeah.
like I've had that happen quite a bit with kids, and I've done this myself, I'm not gonna lie. Where you don't quite feel comfortable going for it, and you just kind of you change things inherently in the skill that mechanically make the skill happen, and you change them in the wrong way to then cause issues that you don't want to happen.
This is a really, really cool point of view. So talk about the way that you should cautiously approach a trick and how you should properly train. Sorry, how you should properly. I'm sorry. How you should properly change a trick so that you can eventually throw it with full oomph.
Yeah, so one thing that I always do is going on to softer surfaces. That's why I am such a big proprietor of going on to soft surfaces most of the time, and then like training it to the point where like you can just do it, and you can do it on a hard surface. It's just most of the time saving your joints, saving potential hard landings some of the time. Like that's a big way that I like to train for gymnastics, because that's the way my coach did things for floors. Like, yes, we still did things on the hard floor. Like, yes, we still like landed, but a majority of the time we were landing on resi pits with mats over it. So it's still like a hard landing.
Yeah.
But it's software. So like it squishes. If you crash, it's not really going to be that big.
Gives you a lot of ease of mind too.
Yeah. And it takes away that fear in your head. Because like, oh, if I crash, like this is going to suck. And that one small thought can sometimes like change things the way you're doing it in your head.
Yeah.
Just enough where you're gonna crash because you're thinking about it too much, and like you're gonna make it happen on accident. Because like, okay, if I'm doing triple back and like I don't want to crash, and like that's the only thing I'm thinking about, and I go to pull and my timing is off, and like I don't pull quite soon enough for the triple back or like quite tight enough, and I like under rotate it and I just like land and eat it. Like that's gonna freak me out more than just going at it with confidence and be like, okay, I'm gonna do the skill, like I've trained for it, like everything's fine, and you just do it. Like, and then if you crash, you can take a learning experience from it instead of just a negative reaction of, oh, I can't do this, because like that's not how that actually works. And I've had kids, and I've done this myself with like certain things, like I've said, but training certain skills where like, especially giants, like is a one big way that I think is a way that you can accidentally change things the wrong way really easily. And same as back handsprings. But to go into particular with giants, once you do the initial part of the tap swing, you pretty much just let it ride up to the handstand. Like you don't really need to force anything too much. It's just kind of like letting the energy carry you over. And if you go to like bend your knees, or you go to arch really big, or you close your shoulders, you
out of caution.
Yeah, you're trying to be cautious, because like your first thought while doing them, and like I have the same thoughts, like it's really embarrassing, but like I cried the first time I did giants because like I was freaked the hell out. And
it's scary, dude.
I was over a pit bar getting spotted, and I was still like freaking out. Like I remember, like it was fine.
Dude, it just doesn't make any sense. Like a flyaway makes sense because you're releasing from the bar, but to like hold on and be pulled back upside down and backwards, it feels pretty weird.
And your first initial instinct is like get into a small ball because that's safe.
Yeah.
Is you do those things, or like you try to slow it down too much, like you don't make it. In which like pushing way off the bar is not that inherently scary, and it's not that hard. But like when you crash on the bar once,
yeah,
it
dude,
is
I really want to learn giants, but that is my biggest fear. Is I'm going to be in like a big fat handstand, and then I'm going to come down and just shins to the bar or something, or I'm going to do the hips and my nuts gonna get caught. I'm like, ah!
It doesn't feel good. I will tell you now. I will clue you in. It really hurts. But that's why I'm saying like going with that too cautious of a mindset of like, especially if you're being coached, like if you have a coach. Like I know tricking really doesn't have coaches, but
we are our coaches. And that's the
Yeah.
purpose of the podcast, so we can help you guys be coaches, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And like if a coach has confidence in you, or like someone has confidence of like, if you have your friend at the gathering or at a session where they're just like, yeah, you could definitely do that, and like you really just need to full send it and like trust yourself to go for it. More often than not, people can see things different. Like people will be able to tell if you can or not. Like,
Definitely. That third person point of view is actually huge.
It is, because you can't see what you're doing inherently. That's why we like to take video. That's why we like to go over video, because like it makes it easier, because then you can actually see what you're doing when you're feeling it.
Right. Well, just today, because I was making that video for the Jeff and my comparison for one of the episodes that we have coming up, I was looking at all my old samplers, and because I'm injured, I have like a really skewed idea in my head of like what tricking, like, like I know what it feels like to get shot out of the barrel. I remember what it feels like to hit a triple cork. I remember all these things. But the thing I didn't remember, which I do now, but even now it still feels kind of foreign, is the idea of doing like cheat nine, pop three, vanish, side swipe, aerial, master scoot. Just the prep of the like those string of movements. There's a way you can do it where you're kind of in place, but there's also a way you can do it where you're moving like 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And I was watching my samplers, and I was like, holy crap, I'm moving so fast and I'm being so explosive. And it's just very different than how I've been moving for the last 4 months doing jujitsu and Muay Thai instead of tricking. And I'm like, that is just so different. It just blew my mind. And so, yeah, it's just crazy to me. So like that third person point of view tells you like, that's basically what I was able to give myself, because now I'm not in my skin, because I haven't been tricking. Like I'm not the same person right now. And so like I'm watching it and I'm like, holy crap, he's capable of some shit. But like now I just need to get that back. Well, I actually just tricked before this podcast too on hard floor. And I did cheat nine, and I was like, there it is. Like I could feel some of that like in there still. And I was like, okay, I just had forgotten what it feels like to really transfer that energy and get that like rebound.
Yeah, because people are normally really cautious about doing explosive movement, because like there's so much inherent risk with very explosive movement. And like
we talk about technique so much, so then it's like, oh yeah, you can also be really strong.
Yeah, you can just be really dummy thick, and like you can like I still remember, and I tell kids that when I'm teaching back tucks too, like it just doesn't make sense. And I think we've talked about it, but I don't know if it was on the podcast. There's this guy on TikTok. I don't remember who he was. He was this bodybuilder, doesn't do acrobatics, didn't do anything. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm just like trying to work on standing back tucks. And he's like, and he just posted, he's like, any tips? And this back tuck's like above his head. And like, like he's never done it. Like he hasn't really trained to do it. It's just he flies off the floor because he's just like obscenely freaking strong. And you're just like, okay, like I guess you can kind of fudge things when you're just like.
When bodybuilders do backflips, for whatever reason, it looks like when normal trickers do backflips with like weights in their hands. Like if they're holding 2 10-pound weights and they do a backflip, or they're holding like a barbell and they do a backflip, that's what it looks like. I don't know why it looks different, but it's crazy.
It's nuts. But like they're also not going at it they're going out with the side of caution of like, okay, well if I make a ball shape and I jump as hard as I can, like that's their cautious. Like I'm gonna jump as hard as humanly possible and just like hope that I flip, because if I flip, I'll be fine. If I don't flip, I'm gonna die.
Yeah, right.
Like, makes sense. That's their cautious.
But it's like also it's not efficient, and it's not physically like healthy or safe to do it that way. So yeah, that makes sense. Also, you're frozen, Sean. Hold on one moment. But I do want to circle back around to that previous point about you talking about using. You're back, by the way. I wanted to circle back to that previous point of you saying like training it into the foam pit and training it into soft surfaces. So you're not necessarily changing the trick out of caution. You're changing the environment out of caution so that you can try to do the trick the correct way through trial and error instead of changing it. That is a really good way to do it. the way I do it, and I think most trickers do it, is they will actively try to change something. And this is the way I think that should also be used to learn how to progress. Is like you actively change something so that you can learn when. So for example, like say you're doing a cork D leg, and you do the D leg to replace a twist. So that D leg is like nice and slow. You like look around a little bit, and then you're like, okay, so now I'm going to do a cork D leg twist, but I can't double full. So you do a cork D leg, and then you try to turn around, and you go, okay, now I know. Now you just take the D leg away. You do a big full. You don't hit that position. You might hit it with your knees instead of a pike. But then you just do that. Then you figure out your double full. So that is a way to change it and be cautious, but don't be cautious in the sense of like doing a full with open arms, kind of like, or like sending a double full, but be cautious like this, like I'm gonna catch myself, or like cautious, like
once you feel
looking around frantically.
Where you're comfortable with, all of a sudden, like stop. Like that's not cautious. That's just being
so caution should be intentional. There should be an action behind the caution. You should be like a variation is action behind the caution. I really like to do cart full D leg punch backside 12, but I don't do cart full punch backside 12 because the D leg is actually active caution. It looks cooler, first of all, but in reality, it forces me to stand up vertically. So it protects my ankles. It protects my low back because after I pike, I can straighten up my body.
Posture.
And so it's and it gives me a major spot point because I don't want to do a back full. I don't want to do a cart full and then be like spotting the ground and saying, okay, now straighten up, find your spot. I'd rather do a D leg, which a D leg is, you can think of it like a 540 kick. And I'm like, now I'm spotting the same direction that I'm going to kick in my backside 12, which means that from that position, now it's only a full turn. Or like a half, like, it's a full turn when you're coming from upside down. So it's a full turn, you're upside down, and then now you know the direction. So it's a lot easier to fix it sooner than it is later. So the D leg is really cautionary more than it is stylistic. And that's what I'm talking about. So if you're going to change something out of caution, then you got to do it actively. Don't be cautious in the sense of like, I need to be ready to fall. And something else that I train a lot is I landed a lot of new tricks this way. I would practice aerial because when you land a trick incomplete, you will fall and you would do an aerial out of your setup. And so we used to always say like, oh, dude, that's my best aerial setup. Triple cork's my best aerial setup because when you land a triple cork and you're falling, you aerial out of it, right? And so what I would do it on purpose. I would do like a cork and I would make it really shitty and then I would aerial out of it and I would practice like just doing aerials. And this is actually super important for me too because I had that right ankle injury. So aerial lands on my right ankle. So what would happen is I would like land a triple cork and then I would go to aerial out of it. And then my body would just be like, nope, you're not. And so I'd put my hands down instead of my foot. Yeah. So I put my hands down instead of my foot. And so I needed to warm up that aerial to be like, if you land in this position, that's what you do. But it sounds like bad caution, but it's actually good caution because I trained it. It's active caution. It's like I am making an active change and I have a prepared plan. Caution without a plan, that's what danger ensues.
Like, so I've seen that where there's times where caution there are times where bailing, which is technically kind of being cautious.
That's what I hate.
Wanting to do things. Like when you get lost in the air, like an oh balls moment is what we tend to call it. We've had some oh balls moments, and you just kind of have to run with it, and you just kind of have to go with what you've trained yourself of. Like, if I'm falling like this, what do I do? Like when I did double full ball out and landed on my stomach and scorpion, because I was just like, I don't think I can continue to flip because I'm too low, and I was like, I don't have enough rotation. I was like, well, I should be fine. Nope.
Right. Like, it's really interesting how you're in those positions as you train. I'm upside down and I go, I can do this or this, and then you just pick one. You don't have time to think it through.
There is no time
to think. But it's way worse to not pick one. I promise.
When you're just flipping like this, just like praying and hoping that you don't die.
It's so bad because what happens is you turn into a noodle and then you usually last minute like extend your arm to catch yourself and then your legs are open and then they clash into each other and then your neck is somewhat like it's like getting in a car accident. You need to be like somewhat prepared and controlled.
And like that's why I like to use a cautious environment, like the way that I described it. So like that's why I like to use resis and foam pits and like mats, because like if you end up crashing or you're wanting to change part of skill. So like the way that I like to teach front halves or like twisting in general is to teach really, really late first and then make it earlier because it feels less weird at first. Because like
I do the exact same thing. Yeah.
yes, and there's ways that I teach it to be more on time once they start grasping the idea of twisting. Like I'll do handstand and they just fall and twist, and like they start to understand that, and I'm like, okay, well now we've worked the back half, so you kind of understand how the pole feels. Now we take those two things and we kind of put them together, but that's being cautious in a different way, and that's like making those small changes, like when you're working D leg twist, like even if you just do like D leg, so like the way that I did, and I was being really cautious when I did B twist the first couple times because like I was like, okay, I don't 100% understand the skill. I think I understand it, and like I don't want to hurt my knee. It's like, okay, what can I do? I was like, all right, well I have a soft mat, so I should be fine if I crash because I'm not going to go over my head. I'm going over my side, so it's a little bit different. So I just let it go over to my back and let it roll, and I was like, okay, well worst case scenario, I kind of know where I'm at like this. So if I feel like I get lost, I know if I turtle and I just kind of like take it to the side, I'll be fine. And I did that a couple times just to like feel what it felt like to crash. And I was like, okay, like if I did that on the floor, it probably wouldn't be too bad, but
Yeah.
I don't wanna. And then I made a change of just like going after a little bit harder, going after a little bit harder, going after a little bit harder, letting my hand touch. Like, okay, now I'm just gonna pull my hand up and like more aggressive spin step and like full send. And it was like, okay.
You talk about it like it took you more than 3 times.
I know.
But I know the thought process that you go through. You're like so analytical and you're, breaking.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, well, if I do this, then if I do that, I'm like,
right.
okay.
You really did 100 tries, like just most of them were in your head.
It's great.
It's real life though. That actually happens. But yeah, the other thing that you're talking about is like if you do create that cautious environment, then you can essentially do variations of the trick that because you have like a pre-existing idea of how a trick feels and looks and the way you activate your muscles to do it. For example, I was teaching this kid how to do a B-twist the other day, and he could cork, but he couldn't B-twist. And so what kept happening is every time he would do a B-twist, he would engage the front of his leg to activate his twist instead of his butt cheek. He would be swinging his leg like a cork, but he'd be taking off like a B-twist. And so what was happening is he was basically just vert spinning.
Yep. Yes, that's what it's called because it's not
because he's pulling his knee in. And when you B-twist, you should not chamber your flagella leg, that back swings. You should be chambering your other leg because imagine you're doing a B-twist round. That first leg that comes through, the one you land on, that's the chambered one, and then the second one is your kick. He was chambering the other way around, which was forcing him to vert spin. And that's because of cork. Because in a cork, you initially swing that right leg.
Yeah, because like a lefty would swing the right leg up, so he was actually swinging it the wrong way instead of just lifting through.
Exactly. Because that backswing creates that axis, and he was creating the axis by lifting it in front. So that was fucking everything up. So what I told him is I was like, okay, you need to variate the B-twist. So I taught him how to do pop 360, and I taught him how to do like just like a cheat 360, started working on like raise. And then from there, I was like, okay, so now when you take off, just think of it like turning around and throwing that kick out. Because if you throw a left leg kick out, the same leg that you're landing on, then that's the driving force of your B-twist. In a cork, the driving force is that right leg swing initially. That's what creates the barrel. Here it's opposite. So I'm trying to teach him how to activate that. So by doing the variation, then he eventually got it down because he realized that his hips were engaged wrong. But he had this pre-existing idea of how it was supposed to feel and how he was supposed to set this trick. And then muscle memory is obviously playing into it too. But by doing the variation, he wasn't going to do the variation to land the variation. He was doing the variation but in a safe environment to teach himself to be like, okay, if I do it like this, how does it feel? If I do it like this, how does it feel? And then as you put in like 50% to like some sort of variation of how you assume that the trick is done, then you'd be like, oh, now I'm going to give 100% into this variation, and then it will work out. And then it eventually does.
Yeah, because you are teaching his body to remember different things for the skill because his body was taught, okay, well, if I'm going to go twist because I do cork, this is how that works. Like this is mechanically how twisting works. And it's like, well, not exactly.
Yes.
There's been one way. And you're going to learn.
And that's really hard in tricking. That feels like a really difficult way to do it because he didn't have many other twisting tricks to pull from, which is why I immediately was like, okay, you need to learn pop 360, illusion kick, B kick, and then like butterfly knife. because once you get those variations and a little bit more twisting in your arsenal, you're like, oh, this is like this and this is like this, instead of being like, this is my only twisting trick that I know, so of course it's going to be similar. You don't want it to be similar. They're opposites.
Yeah, it is. And like that's why in gymnastics there's so many like quote unquote progressions for things, and like it's usually like pretty mapped out, because like if you work on this, it leads to this, leads to this, leads to this.
Right.
But like there's sometimes where you get those weird skills that aren't technically kind of like that. So like if you're looking at a, let's say,
bring it. I bet I can make it.
Okay. Well,
all right, bring it. We played this game before.
Yes, we have. If you did a kazamatsu, which is essentially a sukeful, but it's not a sukeful. It's technically a cartwheel, quarter turn forward, front half out. Like that. That's how that skill works.
Cartwheel, quarter turn forward.
Yeah.
And then you front half out. So it's like a front handspring front flip, but starting in a cartwheel position.
Yes.
Okay. I tried to do that on the floor.
That's not a good idea.
It's not. No, but like into a roll.
Yeah, I get what you mean. So like, and that's one thing. Like, you think about that and you break it down. You're like, okay, so how would I go about this skill? Like working on, like, if I'm going to do drills for it, like working on the ground, because like that's a little bit complicated. So like the first thing that like we would do is I'd be like, okay, can you do a side to side cartwheel? Like most gymnasts should be able to do a side to side cartwheel, like straight over their head in a straight line. Or at least like
yes, I forgot that's hard for you guys, because you guys will start forward and backwards, but that's hard for us. So yes. There you go.
So then you learn off that side cartwheel. Once you start to push, you actually quarter turn forward and step forward, which is really weird for a lot of people because it's you're twisting the way that you're supposed to, but it doesn't feel like it because you're doing that forward. And we've gotten into this argument before of like forward twisting and why it feels the opposite, even though it's not. And it's
I never had that problem, so I can't relate to it at all. I don't understand.
Everybody has that issue because a lot of people they do like they're like, well, round off is your correct twisting side if you're front tumbling. I'm like, it's not. It's actually not. Like, I'm sorry, but it's not. It's actually your opposite side, but that's fine.
I will never believe this. Not today.
I know.
We could have an episode where you try to explain it to me, and then I will do cartwheels in my apartment, and we will try to figure this out.
So, okay. But anyway, so going over that, they're like, okay, well, then you understand that part, and you're like, okay, now do a forward roll. Like, okay. So you do that, and you're like, okay, now through half of the forward roll, just kind of like kick out and land on your stomach. Like, you just do it on a mat so it doesn't hurt. And you're just like, that's doing the skill. Like
doing it to your stomach is a really good plan.
Yeah, right. So it's going in a cautious way.
The way I would have taught that is, so like cart Arabian would be a really good prereq. So like essentially the same thing that you're doing with the forward roll, but also to the stomach is good. And then also a back half in front out on trampoline. That's the same movement as well. Yeah, like for the way you open up and turn. And then you can even do it like a side flip. So you can do like side flip in front out. That way it's more of a quarter turn, so it relates to the trick.
And that's the thing we did. My coach had ways of teaching skills that like helped out, especially on trampoline. We used to call it back quarter stomach, even though it wasn't back quarter stomach. It's literally just back half to your stomach. But the way that
but I see what you're saying though. Those spot points.
Yeah, it's learning those spot points because when you do the kazamatsu, it is literally those spot points because you're coming off the round off in that quarter position, so you know where to spot and then spot forward. So that all you do is like, okay, well, if I dump this over, that's a front tuck. And then you're like, okay, well, if during halfway through the front tuck, you just kind of like kick out and turn.
Yeah.
That's the skill. Like it's just that quick. And people think it's super complicated, or even doing like a pack full. I don't know the actual technical name for it. I don't teach those, but looking
that's on the parallel bars, right?
Yes. No, that's uneven bars.
Shoot.
But so looking at the skill and how I would break it down in my head, I'm like, okay, well, they need to be able to do a layup flywheel. Like that's a pretty easy prerequisite. That's not really an issue. Like, okay. Then they learn the pack salto, which is the backflip between the bars, catch the low bar and swing through. Okay. They can't do that. You wouldn't be teaching them a pack full anyway. So they need that. Like, so other ways of thinking of things is like, okay, well,
what is pack full? You do swing 360 and then land in a handstand?
360 and catch the low bar and then swing back. Or a toe on or some other stuff. But
badass.
It's crazy to watch because like it's really ridiculously hard, but like
It makes it look so fluid. You never understand the difficulty until you're there and you're like, oh.
But like breaking it down in my head, I'm like, okay, well, what are things that I can do for them to start understanding that? And like one guy that did a symposium, he's like, literally just hold them up in their hollow shape, like holding onto a bar. And like this is for teaching the pack salto originally, and he's just like, make them bend down, holding the bar, looking like where they need to be looking, and then just kind of like have them let go of the bar and let go, and have them just like stay stiff to be able to learn to catch and like learn how that feels. I was like, okay. And I was like, well, if you do back extension full and you can catch correctly and being on one hand, you kind of get that same feeling of letting it come up, spin, and catch. Because like that was one way that
Plus, it gives you like an antenna for which way gravity's pulling, so then you know which like you're twisting axis.
And how hard you need to be when you're twisting.
Yeah.
Space, because even doing
you don't think that they should just let go and then like send it?
No. That is, oh my god, dude,
you'd be like, okay, and then twist. So many people would be like 720 to my head on the bar.
Bounces off the bar. God. And like that's the thing where we also used to teach quast, which is just giant hop full.
Oh, like, that's super cool.
Yeah, back extension full turn. It's the same. It is literally the same skill. One's just on the ground and you don't quite hop and you don't really like hop. You just do the turn, but it's the same movement. Like the tap creates a little bit of the lift off the bar to hop, but a back extension full turn is that skill. So like you can be working on it in a cautious way of like, okay, how can I do it broken down to a point where I know I'm not going to get hurt because it's quote unquote the easy version. And then like progress my way up until doing the hard version and like taking the time and not just being like, okay, well, I want to try this and I'm just going to huck it. Like there's times and places for that. There are. But there's also cautious ways to approach it. Like if you are that person, like I don't want to potentially get hurt throwing the skill. I don't want to get scared of the skill. So I want to approach it from a different way. Like if that's your style, which like that's kind of my style.
Yeah, that should be everyone's styles, to be honest. Like just knowing the toolbox, like just simply the way that I kind of took that is like if you can do a tornado kick, and then how do you transform a tornado kick into a cheat 9? Then how do you take a cheat 9 and make it like a backside 12? And then how do you make a backside 12 or from a cheat 9 to a cheat 12? Like, or even a cheat 10 from a cheat 7? Like what makes your cheat 7 look so good? Oh, is it the pump over before you throw your hook? And why aren't you doing that in your cheat 10? So many people do that where they're like, oh, but my cheat 10, I keep my feet together and then my lean makes my kick come out. I'm like, yeah, well, that looks like crap and you're guessing.
Yeah, you're not actually knowing where you're at. You're just
you're never going to be able to turn that cheat 10 into a cheat 12 with that technique. So I taking the proper steps and then varying it correctly. You can. The caution comes with steps. The caution does not come with guesswork. That's pretty much the.
Oh. That's the gist, because like
that's the gist
when you just throw in guesswork, it's a recipe for issues and disaster. Like, please don't do that.
Right.
Well, I don't have anything else to add. Do you have anything?
I think that was nice and compact, to the point. Covered everything I wanted to say. So
perfect. Well, sweet. See you guys next time.
Don't be cautious.
Don't forget to follow us on _flip_side_podcast on Instagram.
And CHRISPY_TRIX. That's chrispy-trix on Instagram. And I also have another YouTube channel, TrixFix, TRIX space FIX, for more tutorials and other things.
And we'll see you guys next time.